The city recently approved a trade-off to make way for a major redevelopment of the current site of a parking garage in downtown Boston at Winthrop Square. The home rule petition still needs to be approved at the State House. The development proposal by Millennium Partners would include community benefits for affordable housing and green space, but there's lingering debate over the trade-off increasing shadows on the Boston Common and Public Garden and what that could mean as a precedent for other projects. We heard those concerns a few weeks ago. Tonight we hear from a principal with Millennium Partners, Joe Larkin. Thank you very much for being with us again, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
I want to start with the fact that we have heard a lot about how this change of law, the increasing shadows, would affect things. But if you didn't have that change of law, how would that affect the plans for Winthrop Square?
Yeah, so the plans for Winthrop Square would change dramatically. The only building that could be built on that site that's in conformance with the existing law, and you have to remember the existing law becomes more stringent the further away you are from the park, as oddly as that may sound. And with those more stringent rules, anything over about 375 feet it would require a change in the law. So the building would be much lower, and from our perspective and from the way we look at what can happen here, that project does not get built.
Well, changing the law at the State House for just another development would certainly mean that, yes, this is about setting a precedent. But I guess you're trying to make the case that this is not just another development that happens to be downtown Boston. So why is that?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, it's a city-owned parcel of land. And the city had a pretty robust competition here to figure out who is the best person to implement the project that's going to provide the benefits for the most people in the city. And they selected us after a pretty robust competition. And they selected us because we were able to offer $152 million here, in addition to having significant improvements to the public realm, using some of those $152 million to make significant improvements to Franklin Park, to the Boston Common. Funds will be used to redo projects in both affordable housing projects in East Boston and South Boston. Quite frankly, the entire city council, 10 members of the city council, as well as the city administration, has basically said, for this city asset, having this project to be built is important.
Well, I do want to hear more about the benefits, but one thing that some of the people questioning this have brought up is that, yes, you're going to have more shadow in these parks, the Common and the Public Garden, part of the year, part of the day, but there's an environmental review, and why not get that finished before changing the law at the State House?
The environmental review is about something called Article 80. It relates to all the environmental impacts of the project, and a developer or a project then needs to mitigate those impacts or understand those impacts and design a building. Here, this is a whole different environment in that this is a building that cannot even proceed. All right, it's not even worth planning or studying without the project if it's going to be illegal. You have to make a project legal, because in all those city permits and all those reviews that goes on typically across the board here, that all happens, okay? But once those permits are achieved, the project can move forward. Here, if we achieve all those permits and when the project is still illegal, that would just be putting the cart in front of the horse.
We're on BNN News, and we're talking with Joe Larkin from Millennium Partners. Joe, I wanted to ask you about those benefits that would be connected with this project but would affect other neighborhoods. Start with the affordable housing part of this.
Yeah, so as part of this project, okay, the city has identified ways for the first $102 million to be spent. And still, they have not identified ways for the last $50 million to be spent. But of that first $102 million, there's a significant improvement to the Old Colony housing project in South Boston, okay, and also to the Orient Heights project affordable housing building project in Orient Heights in East Boston. These are projects that are in dramatic need, dramatic disrepair, and the Boston Housing Authority is at their wits' end about the lack of funds and able to provide to improve these places and many places around the city, and they've identified these monies to be used for those. In addition to that, this project also includes an obligation that we're happily willing to do and want to do, and that is to create about 100,000 square feet of affordable housing. And right now we're working with the Asian CDC, and that affordable housing is to be identified and built in the Chinatown neighborhood somewhere.
Plus, there's going to be some support for, I guess, extending the Emerald Necklace as originally intended along Columbia Road.
Exactly. Now you're talking about the parks.
Right.
Are over here like this, in between the Boston Common, the Emerald Necklace, and Franklin Park. Quite frankly, I think the numbers are about $28 million each for the Franklin Park and for the Boston Common, and about $10 million for the extension and the improvements to the Emerald Necklace.
Of course, the other thing is about the project itself and how this would affect the city. Yes, it's a tall building, but tell me, besides that, what's going on there that's going to be so much of a benefit for the city?
Well, we could talk about like the hypothetical building, and it's going to be a great building, and it's going to be 500,000 square feet, okay, of commercial, cutting-edge commercial office space, and it's going to be about 500,000 square feet of residential units. But in terms of how the city and the people who don't really know the development business on an everyday basis, think about the Millennium Tower building, and think about the Burnham Building, which is the Filene's building there. The project's about a similar scale. And all the good things that have happened, okay, to Downtown Crossing, sort of taken advantage of the potential that was already there, but was sort of set aside for a while, is sort of similar to what's going to happen here.
Well, you recently had an event at the Burnham Building because this used to be the site of Trinity Church, I guess, in its first incarnation. But talk about the Burnham Building, the design there, because a lot of people now, we don't go to Filene's anymore, so we see the exterior, and then we see it juxtaposed with Millennium Tower. Talk about that look.
Yeah, thank you. Good. A couple things. Number one, it was actually the site of the first two Trinity Church. So Trinity Church 1 and Trinity Church 2. And the third one is the one that's in the Back Bay. So it's interesting. They're all on that Filene site. But in terms of the Filene's building, Daniel Burnham, okay, created a masterpiece, okay, back in 1912. His plans were amazing, and he never saw it finished. But what he thought about here is that he believed in merchandising. And just like we put a nice suit on, or we wear a beautiful hat, or things along those lines, he wanted to create a building that was cutting edge at the time that he created there, that would tell all passerbys to come in here because what's inside here is something very special. The ornamentation that you see there, the glass windows that are very large, the beautiful canopy that we've replaced with the exact same, a replica of the exact same one that Daniel Burnham designed, that most Bostonians never saw because it fell apart in the 40s. All those ideas were literally to say, this is important, this is very important, it's the center of our city, and it requires something to be great here. When we were able to repurpose that building, we didn't really repurpose it at all, okay? Primark, right, is still a wares company, a company that serves many folks and provides things that people would like to buy. They're sort of a modern incarnation of Filene's. On top of that, we were able to use the same sort of ideas that Burnham had in terms of open space and air to create amazing office space.